Hello, I'm the Rev David Coleman. I'm the vicar of St Stephen's, Steeton with Eastburn, and I've called this thought for the week, human statues. Why? Well, because statues, they've been in the news quite a bit recently, haven't they? And quite rightly, we've all been asked to reflect on what some of them in our public spaces represent. We've been asked to think about, should they remain? And of course, there's clearly a need to think very carefully about how we teach history in our schools and colleges, and how within that history the statues represent something of significance. We've been asked to think about not just history, but our ethics and our values, how they are taught and how they are expressed and how they are represented, particularly some of the most shameful aspects of our history, and how some of that is reflected in our statues that are in our public spaces. And let's be honest, some of them I think would be better off in museums rather than outside buildings or in parks or in public squares, I think. What about our church buildings? Well, often our stained glass windows project images of Jesus that, maybe Jesus and the disciples, that channel more what we see in those classic early Hollywood films. Jesus as a tall, well-dressed, European-faced white man with blue eyes and occasionally blonde or light brown hair, rather than perhaps reflecting more of the likely reality, a short, Middle Eastern itinerant preacher, not particularly well-dressed, of nothing good to look at. The Bible does say that too. And what about Mary? Well, she's often represented as this paragon of European-styled virtue, a mother of God with a halo behind her head, representing white people. Now, as clergy or readers, we often occupy a physical pulpit a bit like a statue, some say located 6 feet above contradiction, symbolising that elevated position and respect, folks literally having to look up to the preacher. St Stephen's has had something a little different since the mid-90s, when the Steeton Vale Male Voice Choir came back from a tour of Holland that they'd done, and a church in Maastricht had gifted them a new replica of a black Christ that we have had mounted and has been in the church, as I say, since the mid-90s. So some representation of different imagery, but by no means the whole story. Let me take you back 11 years, the summer of 2009, Trafalgar Square, London. The sculptor Anthony Gormley, famous for statues such as the Angel of the North near Newcastle and the iron figures on the beach in Crosby near Liverpool, he initiated something quite different, something quite unusual, an art installation that became known as One and Other. Now, in Trafalgar Square, the west corner there's this plinth. It's 7 metres high. It was designed by Charles Barry, who, along with Augustus Pugin, did the Houses of Parliament. It was built in 1841 and had never had a permanent statue on it, since that for which was expected to go on it couldn't be afforded. It lay fallow for many years. So Anthony Gormley had this genius idea of involving the nation, ordinary people like you and me, to do something about it. So for 100 days, every hour, whatever the weather, a different human statue occupied the plinth, lifted up slowly, carefully, safely onto the platform by a JCB. People had the opportunity to take ownership of the plinth, and whatever they did or didn't do would be in full public view, broadcast live on the internet. My friend and colleague Alison from Sheffield, she took to the plinth in the second week during the early hours of a Saturday, 2 a.m. to be precise. Not a very pleasant early morning weather-wise, I know, because I was there supporting her. And Alison wanted to do something significant and different to represent her Christian faith. She wanted to take the opportunity to model prayer. She was inspired partly by someone called Simon Stylites, who in the 5th century, as a hermit, spent most of his life way on top of a massive pillar, reaching up into the sky. I suppose today we'd consider that to be a pretty extreme form of social distancing. Well, back to Alison. Kneeling as she prayed on top of the plinth, she said, "I found it a profound experience. Trafalgar Square, normally a place of business, hustle and bustle, people leaving the nightclubs and pubs, even at that time in the early morning. But somehow a real peace, she felt, descended around the place. She was aware that some people, well, they wanted to be entertained. A few shouted up, 'Do something!' But Alison resisted that invitation. And she got emails and messages from people who were there, who were watching, who felt the stillness descend palpably. They were affected by the peace of it. She said, 'I'd like to think me being still on the plinth caused other people to be still, to think and to pray.' While she was up there, Alison used her mobile phone to take prayer requests from the public. So her experience wasn't one of running away from the world, she said, but rather following the example of Jesus, drawing away to somewhere slightly remote in order to be closer to God. Perhaps a reminder for us all that we need to take time out from our busy lives to be still and to pray. Now, I don't know what you make of all this, but I think we may agree that we certainly don't need a 7-metre high plinth in order to be able to pray. But maybe next time you have occasion to be close to a statue, to look up to it, to gaze at it, a statue that, unlike Alison, isn't something that's living or breathing, but something that's fashioned, moulded, made, and is by its very definition still in a particular pose. Perhaps you'll consider exactly what it represents through its presence, the place where it is. Consider the values it represents, the story that it tells, and whether it needs to have a context, an explanation, an understanding. Should our statues be celebrated without context in our public places? Do we need to do more to explain, more to celebrate all that is good, all that is diverse, all that is of God? I'll leave you with that thought. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. And wherever you are, may the good Lord bring you his peace. Amen.